Good evening, and welcome to our live webcast of Open Book, Open Mind Online with Alice Hoffman talking about her new novel, The Book of Magic. I'm Ariel Zeitlin, one of the librarians at the Montclair Public Library. And first, I'd just like to draw your attention to the Q&A button. If you're using a computer or a smartphone, it's at the bottom of your screen. If you're using a tablet, it's at the top of your screen. That's how you can send us your questions for the Q&A at the end of this program. And it's also how you can ask for live tech help from my librarian co-host, Alex Russo. Now, I'd like to introduce Max Turtolo, a member of the board of our Library Foundation. Welcome, Max.
Thank you, Ariel. I'd like to welcome everybody on behalf of the Montclair Public Library Foundation. We're so happy you're here for another installment of the Open Book, Open Mind series. I just want to take a minute and explain what the foundation is and what we do. The foundation is made up of Montclair residents, probably some of your friends and neighbors. And our mission is to raise money to fund the offerings, programs, and projects that make our library so special. Our funding provides for library programs like this one, the Open Book, Open Mind series, but also covers staff development, building restoration, and other needs that aren't covered by city funding. Your donations to the foundation support everything from laptop lending, adult learning classes, homework tutoring, resume help, children's reading programs, and most recently, and especially important during the pandemic, an expansion in the availability of Wi-Fi hotspots for Montclair residents without internet access, and a significant growth in e-content. So after you enjoy this event, please consider a donation through our website, montclairplf.org. You can just search for Montclair Public Library Foundation. Gifts of all sizes have an impact, and the library needs your support now more than ever. So I thank you very much, and please enjoy the program.
Thank you so much for all that you do, Max. And we certainly couldn't do it without the Library Foundation. And if anyone in the audience wants to contribute to the library in other ways, please search for Friends of the Montclair Public Library on our website or on Facebook. Now, tonight, we are thrilled to welcome back our guest of honor, Alice Hoffman, to talk about the Book of Magic, the grand finale to her New York Times best-selling series, Practical Magic. Alice is well known for her expressive prose and her mastery of a wide array of genres, historical fiction, literary fiction, and in this case, magical realism. She's the author of more than 30 other works of fiction, including The World That We Knew, The Marriage of Opposites, The Red Garden, the Oprah's Book Club selection Here on Earth, The Museum of Extraordinary Things, and The Dove Keepers. Her work has been published in more than 20 translations and more than 100 foreign editions. She lives in Massachusetts. Welcome back to Montclair, Alice. We're so happy to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Ariel. It's great to be here. Thank you.
The Book of Magic just came out the day before yesterday. It's available to buy from our program partner, Watchung Booksellers in Montclair, and will soon be available to borrow through the library. It's getting great reviews, but I might also be a little prejudiced because so much of the book takes place in libraries, and it's even dedicated to all of the librarians in Alice's life. So thank you for that, Alice. Now, I'm also delighted to introduce Alice's conversation partner, Elisabeth Egan, a book critic at the New York Times Book Review, the author of her own very well-received novel, A Window Opens, and a member of the Open Book, Open Mind Advisory Board. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Okay, so this is the moment we've all been waiting for. And for all of you at home, please remember that you can start submitting your questions while the conversation is going on. I'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Liz.
Hi, Alice. It's so nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again. We were here together a little less than a year ago.
Yes, in early December. And I was completely thrilled to find out that we would be doing this again. And also incredibly impressed. I think you're the only author I know of who has published 2 books during the pandemic.
Really? Yeah. Well, I didn't have a lot else to do, frankly.
I think it's some sort of literary record. So you have my most sincere admiration.
Oh, Liz, thank you. And thank you for being here tonight. It's always like so much fun to talk. So I'm really glad we could do this.
It's a huge treat. And I'm not just saying this, I am a huge hyperbolist, but I really mean this. You are one of the few authors I've ever interviewed twice. And you're one of my favorites. So this is an honor and a huge treat. So welcome back to Montclair, to another Essex County. We talk a lot about Essex in the magic books.
Oh.
And I think that we had talked about starting with you doing a little bit of a reading from the Book of Magic, which I will hold up so everyone can get a visual in their head.
Okay. Well, I think what I'll do is I'll read the first paragraph, which is a lot about libraries, and then I'll just read another section. So I'll just stop in between and just kind of explain what I'm going to read.
Perfect.
And since I can't see with or without my glasses, I'm going to just take my glasses off.
I am right there with you.
Some stories begin at the beginning and others begin at the end, but all of the best stories begin in a library. It was there that Jet Owens saw her fate in a mirror behind the reference desk. Even in her 80s, Jet was still beautiful. Each day she washed with the black soap the family prepared in March during the dark phase of the moon, with every bar then wrapped in crinkly cellophane. Jet had no aches or pains. She had never been ill a day in her life, but fate is fate, and it can often be what you least expect it to be. On this day, when the daffodils had begun to bloom, Jet saw that she had 7 days to live. So the book begins really with Jet, who's one of the 2 sisters. They were the old aunts, however you say it. Choose to say it in Practical Magic, and she sees that she has 7 days to live, and it's kind of, she has to figure out what's important in her life. If you only have a certain amount of time. So I'll just read you a little bit about what she does on the 6th day. On the 6th day, the ants fell silent in a haze of disbelief. The future was less than 48 hours away. Still, no one had ever called them lazy, and they made good use of their time, setting about cleaning the house, which frankly had not been seen to for some time, so that the woodwork and drapes were dusty, and the carpets had to be taken out to the porch and be beaten with a broom. It was traditional to clean after a death, to prepare for the mourners and clear out anything that the deceased might wish to keep private. But knowing what they knew, they had the opportunity to complete the task together before the funeral. They covered the mirrors and they opened the windows to let in fresh air. Sparrows were nesting in the shrubbery and the buds had appeared on the magnolias. The sisters packed up Jet's clothing and her collection of novels, along with a batch of letters Levi, her first love, had sent her when she was a girl, mostly concerning how they might manage to meet without the Reverend, his father, catching on. There was another correspondence that Jet treasured, letters tied up with blue ribbon, and these were Raphael's. She gazed at them on the brink of tears. His, Franny said. She'd never questioned Jet about her love life. Still, she had been curious. Jet nodded. She thought what might have been if Raphael hadn't been there on a certain night. Life is luck, she said. That it is, Franny agreed. So that's what she does on the 6th day. And her death kind of starts everything in motion.
It's the rare book that begins with a death that is still an incredibly optimistic story about life.
True. It's true. It's funny you say that because, I really didn't know that was the way it was going to begin. And it's certainly not a spoiler to give it away because basically right in the first paragraph.
Did you know that was it a purposeful decision to write a happy book that starts with a death?
You know,
Or is that just your natural kind of inclination as a writer?
I think, I think I write a lot to give myself hope. You know, I think I am a more hopeful, more positive writer than I am a person. So, so I think partially it was to give myself hope, and also the times have been so dark, so I wanted some kind of light in the darkness, and that's really what the book is about,
Yeah.
trying to find light in the darkness.
Hold on, I'm opening the door because my dog is just give me 1 second.
My dog's here too, but my dog's not moving right now.
So sorry, my dog was making
No, that's
such a
okay.
racket. Okay, now
The
Fig
dogs
Newton,
want to be in on it. So
Fig Newton is with us. I want to just rewind a little bit to the library, because the book obviously begins and ends in a library, and we have several visits to libraries throughout the book. And I wanted to know if you could tell me, when you think about libraries, what is your iconic one? Like, is it your childhood library, or is it where you go now? Tell us a little bit about that particular place.
that's such an interesting question, because it's really two when I really think about it. It is my childhood library and also my school library, which was so important to me in my elementary school. And my librarian's name was Mrs. Egan, and she was just she was just great. I could hang out at the library whenever I wanted to and take out as many books as I wanted to. And then I went to the Malvern Library on Long Island, and I lived in a different town, but that was the closest library to me, and the librarians let me have a library card, and I was there all the time. I mean, I just remember walking there along the Southern State Parkway, and it just being a lifesaver. I mean, I think that's what it was for me as a child. It was really a lifesaver. And when I think of it now, I mean, now my library is the Boston Athenaeum, which is an incredible library, and just so beautiful. And I just feel very lucky to have anything to do with it. I never thought I would ever be in a library like the Boston Athenaeum. So it's a kind of a combination.
When you go into that library, do they know who you are now? Like, do they recognize you immediately as
as a writer? There's so many writers at the Boston Athenaeum. They have like a whole floor where there are people writing. So, I don't think they're just used to having a lot of writers there.
Well, they're lucky to have you.
Thanks.
So Alice, it has been, I think, 26 years since Practical Magic first came out. How has the world changed in the time that you've written the magic books? And how has your approach to writing changed in that time?
Well, I think everything's changed. I feel like, the one thing that's remained constant is kind of books. And personally, my feeling about books, about being a reader and being a writer, everything else seems to have changed. But I always feel like I'm in two worlds. I'm in a reading world, and then I'm in the real world. And the real world has been extremely difficult in the, lately, much more so lately than during that whole 26 years.
Yeah.
It was interesting for me because I started that book I wrote one summer in a shed on a marsh in Wellfleet. And I finished this book, the last book, the Book of Magic, in a house on the marsh in Wellfleet. And it just seemed, the whole thing seemed very full circle to me. And it was kind of felt like it was meant to be. And I felt really lucky to have been able to spend all this time with these characters.
I'm glad that you upgraded from a shed to a house.
Well, I owned the shed and I rent the house. So I don't know if it's an upgrade.
And when you, 26 years ago, were you working on an IBM Selectric electric typewriter, or were you working on a computer? Like, have you been, I'm kind of curious about even how technology has changed.
I don't know, because it was a shed. I don't know if it had electricity. I think it did. I think it was a computer.
Okay.
26 years ago. I can't really, I used to use an IBM Selectrics.
Yeah.
I think that was a long time ago. So I'm pretty sure it was some sort of form of computer.
Okay. So it hasn't, the technology hasn't changed that dramatically.
Well, it's changed in that, like, I couldn't leave that area. You couldn't, it wasn't a portable thing.
No.
There were no portable, and now I can just write anywhere, which is so great.
And when you started that book, did you think that it would give rise to other books, or
No.
did you have any of the others in your head?
No, not at all. I'm never, and I would have never written anything else, but my readers kept asking me for a sequel.
Yeah.
And if I had known what I was going to do, I would have planned things out, and I would have made outlines, and I would have, I would have made it easier for myself by knowing the whole story. But it's been an interesting experience to not know, and to have to relate to the first book, but things have changed. And I think I'm writing different books than I would have if I'd written it, 20 years ago, or, I think they're different because the world is different and I'm different.
Yeah. I have to say, as a reader, I am so glad that you didn't map it out, because there's a looseness to the reading of them. Obviously each book is very tightly plotted, but there's an unpredictability that I don't think you would have if you had outlined the whole trajectory of the Owens family, back in the day.
Yeah.
It's so unexpected. And you can read them, for anyone who is, has only read the Book of Magic, or has only read Practical Magic, or who has only read one of them. You can read them in any order. That to me is part of the excitement of them.
That is true. And I think that, I think I was freer because I didn't have it all plotted out. And I think that also as a writer, I don't know, you probably feel the same way, but as a writer, I want to be surprised. I want to know what I'm doing, and have structure, but I also want to be surprised and have it be fun. All the same things that, you want as a reader.
How do you keep it fun, book to book? Like, do you have that moment of dread as your mid first draft where you think this will never work? Or
well, my moments of dread come in the other drafts. When I have to do revision, I have much more dread about that. Like, I don't know if I can do this. I have to change this. I have to get rid of 100 pages and do another different 100 pages.
Yeah.
The first draft is more the fun part for me.
That's so funny. Well, that's a whole other conversation. But I always feel like getting words on the page is the big challenge. But I'm glad for you that that seems to be more of a joyful process. I'm curious, do you think you'll ever return to any of the Owens family members again, even though this series is the final one in the series? Like, are there people you might pull out and do other?
There are people that I'm interested in that I don't know, I haven't written their whole stories. I could see writing about them, but this group of people, Sally and Jillian, Franny and Jet, Vincent, and then the two daughters, Antonia and Kylie, it feels to me like this is closure. This is the end for them.
Even Vincent?
I feel that way, but there are other characters that I still feel like, oh, I wonder what their story is or was, going either forward or backward in time. I love to go backward in time. So who knows? It's hard to tell, but for me, for these characters, this seemed like a final thing.
Well, it feels like you're ending in the perfect place. I just loved the characters so much, particularly Jet and Vincent. And actually, this is leading to a theme I wanted to talk about. Aside from libraries, to me, the other big through line through the book was sisterhood. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. Was it intentional? Are you a sister? And were those the two kind of pillars that you started out with, libraries and sisters?
Well, I think it was really Practical Magic is all about sisters, and sisters who are completely different, but who are very bonded and who will do pretty much anything for one another. And I think for a lot of readers, and for me too, you either felt like you were like Jillian or you were like Sally, and they were very different. And I think as the books have progressed and as time has changed, they're not quite so different as they once were, which sometimes happens as you get older. But it is about sisterhood, I think partially because I don't have a sister and I always wanted to have a sister. Just the way it's also about having daughters, which is something that, I feel like a huge a hole in my life because I didn't have a daughter or a sister. So writing these books was kind of a way for me to experience that.
Mhm.
But I also think there are different forms of sisterhood, and I have a lot of friends who feel like I
Yeah,
have that kind of sister experience with old friends, and sometimes friends who I would never have met now that, but that's that sisterhood feeling. You're in the same family and you're linked by all your past experiences.
I hope I'm not overstepping, but you strike me as somebody who has a very large and tight circle of friends.
Well, it's funny because I think COVID has done something with friendship because in a way, my friendship circle has expanded. In a way, it's shrunk because I feel like you really see only the people who are like the most important to you. You may have all these friends that you like, but you can't get to everyone and you're limited. And then there are other people who you feel like you want to see more and more. I have a friend who I love, who I never saw, the writer Diane Ackerman, but we watch TV together now every week. And she lives in Ithaca and I live outside of Boston. So we
Yeah.
get together virtually. So it's kind of deepened our friendship.
Yeah.
So it's just been a very interesting experience of what happens to relationships during these kinds of times.
There's been a distillation, I think.
Yes.
You wind up in the end with the most important people, and that's been kind of in some cases I think a little surprising, and in some cases really fortifying. One thing I love about the Book of Magic is that we've all been housebound for 18 months, almost 2 years, and this book takes us to other countries, and it takes us, we're not just in Massachusetts, we're halfway across the world. Was that an intentional decision for you? I mean, I know that you not only do time travel, but continental travel in most of your books, but was it a different experience during COVID because you felt hooked up?
I think, that wasn't conscious, but they do go to all of my favorite places. So since I couldn't go to all of my favorite places, they went instead. And so I get to go to Paris, I get to go to London, and, so it's kind of, I think, my way of being there. And I think it's just fun to go there reading wise.
There's that old writing adage, write what you know, but I also think there's something to write what you want.
I think so too.
You know what I mean? There's an aspirational quality to writing. And as soon as I started reading this, I was like, that Alice Hoffman, she doesn't want to be housebound. She wants to get on the scene.
Well, that's what writing is for me anyway, is that it's so freeing, and it's funny that you bring that up, because when people who are starting out writing say that to me, I totally don't believe in write what you know.
No,
I was taught by my great professor, Albert Gerard, write what you can imagine, which means you can write anything as long as you can imagine it and feel it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like write what you want.
Yeah, I personally am always stuck with write what you know, and I have a hard time getting away from it. So I'm always inspired by people who can time travel, and which actually I'd love to hear a little bit about your research for this book. I think when we talked in December, we might have talked a little bit about your research for all the books, but was there anything in particular for this one that was different, or what was your process?
Well, the last book, Magic Lessons, took place in the 17th century. So that was a huge, enormous research project for me. This book takes place in the here and now, but there was still research involved. There was research about travel. There was research about magic and spells. There was, this book kind of had fun research. So it wasn't overwhelming the way certain books can be.
I would like to also talk about Amelia Bassano. Can you tell anyone who is, and also I want to say to those of you who are watching, it is sort of weird because I can't see you or make eye contact with you, but I'm very excited that you're submitting questions, and we will turn to your questions in a little bit, I promise, but I'm selfishly tackling some of my own questions first. Alice, tell us who Amelia Bassano is and how you discovered her.
Yeah, she's in my book, she's the writer of a very dark grimoire. but that's invented. In reality, she was the author of the first book of poetry published by a woman in Britain in the 17th century. She was at least partial, her father was a Jew from Venice and a musician. And she has a very interesting history that is very, critics debate it and argue over it. Some people say that she was the Dark Lady of Shakespeare's poems. Some people say she was Shakespeare, that she wrote the plays or had a huge influence because as he was not very educated, she was very educated. She was the mistress of the person who was in charge of all theater in London. She was supposedly had an affair with Christopher Marlowe, who might have taught her how to write a play. There's a lot of debate over it. And I thought she was such an interesting character. And it was the idea of like words have such power and such magic, and that she was, you know, she's barely remembered as somebody, as a writer, possibly because of her gender, and that she never got to do some of the things that she might have been able to do had she been a man. And so in my book, she turns to kind of dark magic. And she influences, you know, all of the Owens women. Her book is found in Magic Lessons, and then it reappears again in the Book of Magic. And it's when the Owens have a problem with a family curse. And so the book is one of the things her book, Amelia Bassano's book, does is it explains how you can possibly break a curse.
How did you first find her? Like, do most people know who she is?
I don't think most people know who she is. I think I was just reading. I just was kind of reading something about Shakespeare, and kind of her name was mentioned. And then I read a book about her that I thought was, that I referred to, and I have a list of books in the back that I thought the author presented a very good case for her, you know, potentially having huge influence on the plays and maybe even writing some of them. So who knows? I mean, she's a very mysterious, interesting character.
Do you think that she might merit a whole book for herself?
You know, I'm not sure, you know,
No pressure.
but I feel like she's kind of like this huge presence in the Book of Magic, and it's so much about books.
Yeah.
And I mentioned so many books that I love, and there's kind of a list of books that really influenced me. So I think the fact that she was, you know, the first woman to publish in England, you know, is kind of like reverberates throughout the book.
Yeah. Let's talk about, well, I want to talk about the family curse, but first let's talk about the book, the book list at the back.
Oh yeah.
First of all, when I saw it, my eyes almost kind of skimmed over it, because at first I thought, you know, lots of authors include resources that they use, and I always find it interesting, but I'm really much more interested in the story. The author has already done the work, and I don't necessarily need to read those books. And when I realized how eclectic and far-ranging the book list was, it really is the list of books that you love, I think, and that have really influenced you. It just felt so heartfelt and genuine, and I loved it. And if I had all the time in the world, I would just make it my mission to begin at the beginning and read straight through. But I wondered how you decided what to include, and if there are any books that you have thought about, you know, since in the 2 days since the book has come out, or in the lead up to publication, that you thought maybe you might have included.
You know, I'm sure there are lots of other books and lots of other books that I loved, but when I thought about, I do feel like books form you. You know, they form who you are as a person, and they also form who you are as a writer, of course. But when I thought of like, what are the books that made me be me? These were the books. And many of them were books that I read when I was very young and influenced me hugely. And I just, you know, books I've just felt really grateful to. And, you know, I think what you realize is that, you know, as a writer, that you're doing part of it, but then, you know, you realize that, you know, the reader is doing all the rest. You know, it's so interactive, and I just feel like so grateful to have become a reader. And these books were just the books that were extremely special to me. But of course, there's a lot of other books that I loved, but
Yeah.
These are kind of the core group that really affected me at different times in my life.
If you had, this is the hardest question I'm going to ask you all night.
Okay.
If you had to pick 2 books that were the books, like your desert island books, the books that keep you company, the books that shaped you, the books that you, when you wake up in the middle of the night, you think about to soothe yourself, what are they?
Well, I think if I was on a desert island, I don't know, the book that I would want to have with me is Wuthering Heights, because I always feel like every time you read that book, it's like a different book. And depending on what stage you are in your life, you know, if you're 18 and you think Heathcliff is the great romantic hero, if you're 30 and you think he's a monster, you know, if you're older and you think he's very complicated, you know, it's always different. And there, you know, it's such a complicated book. I think it's really like the greatest psychological novel ever written. So, you know, I think if I had that on a desert island, that would be kind of enough.
That's it?
That's it. Just give me Wuthering Heights.
What about 84 Charing Cross Road?
What about it?
Have you ever read it?
No.
Oh, I'll email you tomorrow and tell you about
Okay.
it. That's my desert island book.
Oh, it is? Oh,
Well,
now I really want to read it.
Oh, it's so great. I don't want to waste everyone's time telling you about it, but it is, it's about a book lover who an American woman who starts to communicate with a British bookseller.
I think I do know that book.
It was made into a movie.
Want to read it.
It was the very first book my husband, actually the very first book my husband ever gave me was The Joys of Yiddish. And the second book was this book, 84 Charing Cross Road. And to me, it just opened up this world of book lovers. Like it's a must, Alice. I would have thought, I thought it would spark like 20 minutes of conversation.
Also, I feel like I saw the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. The movie's fine, but the book is better.
Okay. Well, always, but
always.
Thank you.
Not
Yeah.
necessarily. I mean, the Practical Magic is a wonderful movie.
Yes, it is. It is. I feel like I was really lucky. It was like just so filled with great actresses, and I just feel very lucky. And you know, it's really become a cult movie that I feel like every year it's more popular than it was the year before, which is great.
What was it like seeing it for the first time?
Well, the weird thing was going out there and going to like a stage set, you know, in Hollywood, and walking into this darkness and then walking into the kitchen, which I think is the best kitchen in film or anywhere. And it was just so strange, you know, to have spent so much time alone in this shed on, you know, writing, and then it became a real thing in someone else's imagination. And it was interesting for me because I felt of all the people, and I was a screenwriter for many years in Hollywood, but I really felt in that instance, the person that I was most like was the set designer, because I felt like, you know, they had built this world to step into. And I always feel like that's what I do as a novelist, is I'm building a world, and then the characters step in and start to live in that world.
Yeah. Which is your favorite part, the building of the world and the placing of the characters, or this part where you're bringing that world into the wider world and talking to people about it?
Oh, definitely the building of the world.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But you're so good at this.
Well, you know, for me, to tell you the truth, as a kid, you know, I started reading as an escape, and I feel like as a writer, I'm doing it for the same reason. I mean, I'm escaping into a different world. Yeah.
I don't blame you at this.
Yeah. Right now, I think a lot of people want to do that. So
I totally agree. We have so many good questions. I'm going to start. I have a couple more. Actually, wait, before I go to the great questions that we've gotten, I wanted to talk about the Owens family curse.
okay.
And maybe you could tell people who haven't had it. Well, anyone who's read the other books knows something about the curse, but maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Yeah. And I was wondering if you share my opinion that every family has a curse of some sort.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it's really true that, like, you know, we are affected by things that happen to our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents, even, you know, the kind of the idea of ghosts in the nursery, things that affect us that we never even experienced or knew, and that kind of come down through a family. So I definitely do think that the curse in this case, really kind of surfaced in magic lessons, because in the 17th century, Maria, it's kind of the origin story. And Maria Owens is in love with the wrong man, a horrible man, John Hawthorne, who was a judge of the Salem witch trials. And so she kind of puts this curse on her own family to protect them. And so that if they fall in love, something terrible will happen to whoever they fall in love with. And she thinks she's protecting them, but it turns out to be a curse, not a protection, and affects people for generations and generations. And so the hope in this book is that maybe at last they can maybe break that curse.
Yeah. Well, it does show you how what happens to your forefathers and foremothers has a long tail. And I think we see that in real life also all the time.
I think so too.
There's a domino effect.
Yeah, it's hard work to break a curse.
It is. It is. I'm going to transition actually back to the question, the Hollywood question. Okay. Somebody has asked, might the other books in the series become movies? And the next question is, how do you feel about the movie version of Practical Magic, which we already talked about?
Yeah, I love the movie version. It's not the book, but it's its own creature. I think, that happens. It's such a different medium. And, I'm really grateful Sandra Bullock decided to do it. She really made it happen. But the person who was the producer, Denise Denovi of Practical Magic, has optioned magic lessons and the rules of magic. And hopefully it will be a TV series, kind of an intergenerational time traveling TV series.
And how involved will you be?
I think I don't want to really write it. That's for sure. But I think I'm involved with it. But we'll see what happens. You just kind of never know. Hopefully, it will happen.
Are you working on something new already? Already?
Oh gosh. Well, what else is there to do other than walk the dog?
I don't know. You already wrote 2 books during the pandemic, and this one just came out 2 days ago.
But I started them long before the pandemic came along. I did versions of them during the pandemic, but I had been working on them for quite a while. It takes a while for a book. It seems, I tend to work on something and then I put it away and then I go back to it. So
while your book to be is, say, in galleys and the momentum is building, are you already percolating the next story? Like, are you taking, do you keep a notebook of characters?
On my computer. I used to keep a notebook, but not anymore. Yeah, I have, kind of novels. I think of them as kind of planes on a runway. Maybe some will take off, some will be delayed, some will never go anywhere.
And you don't feel a dread of going back to those files?
No, I feel more of a dread of walking down the street than going back to those files.
That's why you have written how many, close to 30 books?
I think so.
Wow. And I love the number doesn't even seem to be on the tip of your tongue. No. That's amazing. Okay, here's another question. These are my absolute favorite books, by the way. I want to live in that house and be part of that family. Thank you. Oh, okay. That's not a question, but that works for me.
You know what? I want to be part of that family too. I think that's why I felt so lucky to be writing about them for so many years.
Did you have a house in mind? Like, is there a house in your town that you walk your dog by that is kind of the house that you envision, or is it just?
No, I think it's just more of a house in my imagination. It's not based on anything. I tend to not base anything like that on something real, like real conversations or real people or, real houses, unless it's a historical character and they actually live someplace but no.
That is amazing and impressive. Thank you for Practical Magic and bringing Sally and Jillian to life. I realize that a simple thank you often pales to one's contribution. The characters mean so much to my best friend and I, and represent how we are as sisters from different families.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
And it's just what I wanted and just what I felt while I was writing the book, that they could be from the same family or from different families. It's more of kind of a bonding of sisterhood and
Yeah.
loyalty.
I'm treading carefully because I think my very own sister might be tuned in tonight. But
you're lucky.
I am lucky. I'm not positive, but yes, I am very lucky. But I will say, I really do believe in the idea that you can create a sisterhood. That
Yeah.
if you aren't lucky enough to have a biological sister, or even a sister you feel close to, like I am a believer that your friends.
Absolutely. And I also feel like, the aunts in the book really are kind of surrogate mothers. They are like mothers to these two girls who come as two orphans originally, and they have a really close relationship. And I just think you can have lots of different mother figures as well as sister figures in your life.
I know we just said that you don't write a lot from life, but I wondered if you were somebody who had aunts that you were close to, because I do feel like the aunt relationship is a very particular thing, and it rang really true.
Oh, yeah.
Here.
Yeah, I was close to some of my aunts, and I feel like I'm very close to some of my nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
I feel like I am an aunt, and am very involved in their lives and, care about them deeply. So that wasn't hard for me to write.
As you were shifting perspectives, was there a favorite perspective that you had to work in? Was there one vision of this world that was clearer than others?
I don't think so. I feel really lucky in that the characters in the world of practical magic really came to me without a huge struggle.
Mhm.
It's like they walked in through the door. I just followed them. And that's not to say I didn't do lots of drafts and it wasn't work, but imaginatively, it wasn't that difficult.
Alice, you're going to miss them.
Miss them?
Yeah.
I think I will miss them, but I was thinking about that all the way through writing the book. I cried a lot through writing the book, but I actually don't think I'll miss them because I feel like they're there, like they're still part of my life. So because they're in so many books and it's such a kind of broad canvas, I think that I don't feel like I've lost that much.
Do you run into people in your life that remind you of people in your books? Like,
never.
they live among you in that way?
I don't know. I don't know, because I'm not with characters. I'm not looking out at them. I'm looking out from them. It's like I'm inside.
I can't even imagine. It's like a miracle.
I think it's just imagination.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a blessing.
It's what you do when you read a book. You imagine yourself to be that character. You imagine yourself to be seeing the world as that character does and feeling that character's emotion. I mean, that's the great thing about reading.
Yeah.
It just so expands your experience.
Oh, well, this is a perfect segue. Somebody asked, do you have a favorite character from the book? If so, who is it? And are any of the characters based on you? I'm guessing no, but I'm curious about your thoughts.
I don't think any of the characters are based on me per se, but I do think that a novel is like a dream. And, they say about the dream, you're every character, including the cat and the dog. I mean, I think a novelist is, each character is a little bit of that novelist. When I started out writing, I felt closest to Sally, who's kind of more normal and, wants to have an ordinary life and doesn't want magic in her life. But as time has passed, I feel much closer to Franny, who's the more difficult, kind of cantankerous aunt, who has a very big heart that she tries to hide. So I feel closer to her.
She really grew on me throughout the book. I felt very connected to Jet in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then Franny reminded me so much of my own sister that I just loved her dearly. She was really wonderful. This is a bit of a segue, but I'm wondering if you listen to your audiobooks, because I loved the narrator of the Book of Magic, who I was expecting it to be Sutton Foster, because she was the one who narrated, I think,
She
the
did
West.
magic lessons. Oh, I
Yeah.
love her. Yeah.
But I can't remember the name of the narrator of the Book of Magic, but
Magic. Jennifer Ely.
she was
Yeah.
beautiful.
I kind of knew her because she was there was a film version of one of my books called The River King that she was in. So I met her many years ago. She's an amazing actress. She's been in so many things here and in Britain. And when I heard that she was doing it, I just thought she's perfect because she has kind of this storyteller's voice.
Yes.
And I just thought she was terrific.
And do you listen to the whole thing, or do you just listen to kind of a sample?
I listened to portions of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think these books lend themselves to audio because they're so poetic and so rich. I hate the word evocative, but whatever it means, I think they are.
I've had some really good readers, so that's been really nice.
Yeah, it was at first I thought I might miss Sutton Foster because I'm a huge fan of hers.
She's great, and I'm a huge fan of hers also.
Yeah, she's
But
amazing.
I think it's nice for each book to have kind of its own reader, its own world. So.
I agree.
And I think Jennifer was just is amazing reader.
We have another question from our listeners or watchers is, why were you always interested in writing about magic?
Well, I think because I started out reading about magic. I started out reading fairy tales and myths and books by Edward Eger. He was my favorite writer when I was a kid. And, fantasy and science fiction, fairy tales, stories my grandmother told me. But, now I think that, there's magic in all of the original literature. Like all original literature is magical. And I think words and magic kind of go together. So that it wasn't a choice. It was just kind of what I was drawn to and what I cared about.
It's funny. I never read anything about magic as a kid. I was only interested in real things. Nancy Drew.
Oh, but Nancy Drew. No, I was interested in Nancy Drew.
I didn't want anything that wasn't real though. But now as an adult, I think as kind of, actually, I think really Harry Potter probably got me, like when I was reading Harry Potter to my kids, I was like, oh, wait, I missed a whole, I missed half of literature, basically.
Yeah. And I always feel like realism is kind of like the new kid on the block.
Yeah.
And that magic has been around forever. And it's part of the oral tradition of grandmothers telling their granddaughters and grandchildren stories. And yeah, I just think it's kind of the original literature.
Yeah. So we have a question from somebody who said, are you a witch? I am. And do you practice any form of the craft?
Oh, no, I'm not officially. But I appreciate people who do that. And I know I have a lot of witches who read my work, and I want them to feel good about my presentation of witches, but I feel influenced by kind of the mythic character of the witch. And I always have felt that way.
Why do you think so many little girls dress up as witches for Halloween?
I always think about that. I think you have a choice. You can be a witch or a princess, and one has power and one doesn't. So yeah. I always wanted to dress up as a witch myself, right? And
why would you not be a witch? They have
I don't know. And still, even now, when there are so many other options, they still want to be a witch because you have power.
That's exactly. Whenever I'm answering the door for trick-or-treaters and a witch comes by, I'm like, you go, girl, like that.
An extra Snickers bar for you.
I know, completely. We have a comment from somebody who says, Alice is by far my favorite author. Oh. Same here. I've read almost every book she's written. I wonder how old Alice was when she wrote her first book and what the title was. I also wonder if it's harder to begin or end a book. I'm sensing like a real old soul behind this question. And it's a
really good question.
I really like those.
Well, my first book I wrote when I was in graduate school. And I think I was 21 when I was in California writing it. Wow. And I think it was published when I was 23. I never really expected to be published, but what happened to me, and this is really just a completely odd, lucky thing, is that my professor sent a story of mine to a friend of his. He published it in City College's magazine. And when that came out, I got a letter from Ted Solitaire, who was a great editor in New York. And he said, "Do you have a novel?" And I wrote back and said, "Yes, I do." And I started writing really fast. And I think that's why I'm a fast writer, because I thought, what if he retires, or what if he, something happens to him? I better write this book really fast.
And you
So I
didn't.
wrote it. I
You
wrote it.
didn't have it. Like
I
you
didn't
didn't
have
start.
it. No,
How long did it take?
6 months. I mean, it had, and then I worked with him for about a year on it.
Yeah.
And in the end, he didn't take it. He took a different book instead, but he sent me to my agent, Elaine Markson, and she was my agent for forever until her death. And the book was published by Farrar Straus. And it was just, I never expected it, but I always think about that, like the idea when somebody opens a door, you have to like decide, are you walking through or not? And I'm still to this day shocked that I walked through the door, but I did.
At that age, it's a career that takes serious guts to, kind of plant your flag on that moon and say, this is what I'm going down this road.
I know.
And here you are.
It really was. I just felt like no one's ever gonna call me and write to me and ask me that.
Did you have another, has writing always been your primary profession, or did you ever teach, or?
I didn't teach because I felt like the people I knew who taught gave so much to their students that they didn't have time to write. But I was a screenwriter full time.
Yes. Yeah.
In Hollywood. And then when I was starting out, I worked in department stores. I had a zillion jobs.
Yeah.
So to support my writing.
How many years was it before you were able to quit the department store job, quit the screenwriting, and just wake up in the morning and turn to your novels?
Well, things used to be so different that when I sold my first novel, which was called Property Of, it's about a street gang in New York, and I got $3,000, and that's what I made a year. So,
What year was that?
It sold to paperback for enough money that I had the next like 3 or 4 years covered, and after that, I could write. But it was different then. You didn't need that much money to live, really, and. The way I lived at any rate, but
you have writers in your family? Was there any model for becoming a writer?
My grandfather was a writer. I mean, I think he was kind of a failed writer. He wrote poetry and essays and in Yiddish.
Mm-hmm.
And he was also on strike for his whole life. I don't know if he ever worked really. He was a socialist. And so I'd always heard about this grandfather who wrote, but I didn't. He passed away when I was very young, and I didn't know his work.
Mm-hmm.
I later was able to get a hold of his work through the Yiddish library. It's at Hampshire College,
Mm-hmm.
and they had one of his books, and which was never really published, but I had it translated and read some of it, and it was interesting to kind of get to know him through his work. But I had always heard, that my grandfather was a writer, wanted to be a writer.
Did you enjoy reading his work?
Well, I wrote a book called The Museum of Extraordinary Things that was really kind of based on his life in a way.
Wow.
It's about the Triangle Factory fire and about unions in New York in 1911. He was later on, but that was a lot to do with his life. So I think I was kind of influenced by that.
Well, I have one other question of my own, and then I have 2 other questions in the queue. 2 questions that I meant to ask you earlier. Are you a cook? Because you have so much delicious food in all of your books, but especially in the Book of Magic. And the second thing is, could you maybe privately at some point send me the recipe for black soap?
Well, I don't know the recipe for black soap, I have to tell you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But, it's kind of like, it's not, this isn't me. These characters are not me.
Yes.
I am not a good cook. I am a terrible cook. But I appreciate people who can cook. And I have this kind of little cookbook that I'm working on of their recipes. And, it may include the black soap. I don't know. But yeah, I'm interested in kind of domestic life and what it means to women's lives.
Yeah.
and cooking and making soap and doing all those things about how important it is to women's lives, and how, you know, it's really an art form. So I am really interested in it.
For some reason, I feel like I might have said this to you the last time we spoke, but I feel that the story of women's lives and women's history is found in those comb-bound church and synagogue cookbooks that you can buy.
Yes.
Like,
Oh my gosh, I did
hard.
get, yes, I
so many
totally.
untold stories, but of women, you know, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers. But if you look at their recipes, there's
Yes.
life.
Actually, I got this great cookbook when I was writing a book that takes place in St. Thomas about Camille Pizarro and his family. And I got this great cookbook that was put together by like some kind of synagogue group about, you know, recipes. And I just thought it's really kind of, each recipe is like a story of a life.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Even if you go back to the original Joy of Cooking,
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's just a wealth of, you know, stories about people's lives kind of between the lines. Okay, this is a fun one. Do you have a favorite snack, drink, or meal you eat when you're writing? And do you have any talismans for luck when you're writing?
I don't really eat when I'm writing because I feel like it's messy for the computer. I drink a lot of tea and water.
What kind of tea?
Just regular English black tea or ginger. I also like. And it's interesting because the characters in the magic books are so involved with tea and making teas and drinking teas for different reasons. But I don't really have rituals per se. I mean, no, not really. I'm sorry.
I would like to tell this person who's watching that I recommend Cheez-Its as a snack to be consumed.
Cheez-Its are great.
I always have Cheez-Its nearby, which doesn't serve me well in the work at home life, but yeah, they're really
I'm a fan of the Cheez-It.
They're not greasy. Yeah, they're great. And I've been saving this one because I knew I would like it. I have no question. I just wanted to tell you how much I love your books. My English teacher in college told me about you after she learned of my religion. Thank you for opening doors to our religion and helping those who read your books to know more about us.
Oh, thank you so much. That's lovely. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me.
Do you feel like there are so many people out there who feel like they know you through your books? I mean, I sense, even just mentioning to people that I was talking to you both times, I feel like I've run into so many people who are like, oh, Alice Hoffman, as if, you know, that you're their long lost friend. I don't think every author inspires that.
Well, thank you. That's really nice. You know what I think? I've come to really believe that the thing that happens when you're reading a book that's really transformative and so important is not so much that you feel that you know the writer, but that you feel known. You yourself feel known. And I remember feeling that when I read certain books that I loved, that I felt this deep connection with the book. Not so much the writer, but the book, almost as if, how could they have known that I feel this way? You know, how could they have known?
Yeah.
That kind of connection that really, I think, only comes with reading. I mean, I think it is the art form that connects us in such a deep way. But that's very nice to hear. And certainly I felt that about the writers that I loved. I felt this, you know, real connection with them.
That's such an important point to make in this era of social media, where I feel like writers are under so much pressure to like be tweeting their innermost thoughts and posting pictures of their work process. And I feel like it's not really about, to me, it's not really about that. It's about the book, and it's about being seen and feeling seen. And I tend to go down these rabbit holes of, you know, if I'm loving a book I'm reading, I will then read all the author's tweets. And I just think, if I were somebody who was publishing books as often as you are, I would think that just seems like such a distraction.
It is, but you know, I feel like I am on social media, and I do feel like it is I mean, I don't feel like I'm talking about everything. I feel like I'm talking about books. And I feel like there is a connection, it's funny. I do feel like there's a connection. I've become friendly with certain people.
Yeah.
I've met people when they were like in graduate school who now are publishing novels. And, I think that, it's not that you talk to everyone, that would be impossible. But I think, I used to be very negative about it. I think it kind of depends on how you use it.
Yeah.
It can be used in so many different ways, but, I just feel like, well, I'm there to kind of talk about my books and to celebrate books in general. And that's what it is for me. But there's a lot more happening than there used to be, a lot more connection. There's a lot more of being out there. And I think I totally agree with you. It's really, when it comes down to it, it's really just about the book.
Yeah, it's about the book. I'm going to ask you one more question.
Okay.
From a listener or watcher. Are there any other magic witch books in your future? As the previous viewer expressed, you have opened doors for us and made us less scary to your readers. Thank you so much for that. Blessed be.
Oh, thank you. Yes, there are, for sure.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, Alice, I will look forward to reading your other magic and witch books and also listening to them. And I'm just really honored and grateful to have had the chance to talk to you during
I
this
love
very
talking to you.
time.
I feel like, we're maybe this is part of COVID because we get so used to this, but I feel like it's a real visit, and I feel very lucky to be talking to you about books and about my book. So thank you so much.
I feel the same way, and I've had to remind myself at several points during this conversation that there are other people involved.
I know.
So I'm sorry. I feel that I might have made it all about myself, but let me just hold up the book again, and to anyone who is watching, or I guess no one's just listening, but go read this book. This is just it's just incredibly beautiful, and I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to find so much beauty and also a page turner of a story at this moment. And I just highly recommend it for your book club, as a gift for your dear friend, the witch in your life, your mother, your grandmother. And Alice, thank you for your generosity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Liz. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a real pleasure.
Okay, well, Alice and Liz, thank you so much for coming to Open Book, Open Mind for this thought-provoking, wide-ranging, and really delightful discussion. I also felt like I was eavesdropping happily on a wonderful conversation that I didn't want to have end. I want to thank everybody in the audience for coming today, because as I always tell you, without you, we're nothing. I wanted to second Liz's suggestion that you consider buying the book, because it's available for sale by our partner Watch on Booksellers, and it will also soon be available to borrow through the library. And if you care about your authors, if you want them to be able to put more books out into the world that will change your life and open doors, if you want them to keep coming back to Open Book, Open Mind, then you can pay them the most sincere compliment that an author can have, which is to have you buy their book. When I really love a book, I want to own the book. And this book looks a little less pristine than some of the other books that I've shown here, because I've read it and reread it and really enjoyed it so much. Finally, we hope that you'll join us for our next event with Sandra Cisneros, the author of The House on Mango Street, and the Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Chiara Alegria Udes, on Sunday, October 24th at 4 p.m. Be well, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.